So today we're talking about Impossible Burger and their response to a letter that was written by the advocacy group Moms Across America, pretty much slamming the Impossible Burger, criticizing it for its use of ingredients containing glyphosate. In fact, what Moms Across America claims is that the Impossible Burger, when compared to the Beyond Burger, actually contains 11 times more glyphosate than the Beyond Burger. Before we get into the video, let me just say, I'm not a vegan. I have nothing against vegans. I was a vegan at one time. I believe vegans are in their right to try to find meat alternatives. I know what it's like to be a vegan and to want fake meat. I've eaten the Impossible Burger before when I was a vegan. When I was a vegan, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was delicious. I enjoyed every bite. I thought it was the greatest thing known to man. I didn't even care about the pesticides. I didn't care about the soy and wheat. I didn't care about the gluten. I just wanted a goddamn burger. But what happens in this letter by Impossible Foods is pretty much a reckless use of fake science and fake data and, really more than anything else, propaganda to prove a point that Moms Across America is wrong in their assessment, which I also don't think is perfect. I think there's a lot wrong in the Moms Across America letter, and I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible, but when you really read this letter from Impossible Foods, you can't help but notice, obviously there's an agenda, and they're not using the correct data to really make the point. You know, I think really more than anything else, they would have done themselves a better service by just saying, look, we're using the crops available. Our food supply in here in the US is just shitty. They spray everything with glyphosate. Even if you want to eat just fruits and vegetables, there's a good chance you're going to get glyphosate. So it's better to just eat a burger that doesn't come from an animal, because we're trying to be less shitty about the way we produce things than the industrial animal agriculture industry. Now, I will give Impossible Foods credit for making the Impossible Burger, because, really, no matter what side you're on, even if you're a meat eater or even a carnivore, you can't help but state the fact that the industrial animal agriculture industry is a complete clusterfuck. It's a complete disaster. It's torturing animals for the mass production of meat. These concentrated animal feedlot operations, CAFOs, are one of the worst things that could happen to, definitely animals. Pretty much animals, but also our environment and the people that live around these things. They're incredibly toxic polluters. They just, nonchalantly just dump toxic material into people's water supplies. They pollute the land. You can't grow anything anymore. They're really a nuisance, especially considering the fact that there are more sustainable ways to grow meat and to use animals to fertilize the land. So while I am going to be very critical in this video of Impossible Foods, I'm also not going to completely slam them for trying to come up with an alternative that makes vegans happy and that tries to, help take money out of this terrible industry known as the industrial animal agriculture industry. So if you don't know what the Impossible Burger is, it's basically lab-grown meat. They use plant-based ingredients to pretty much make a burger. And as a former vegan, I remember when the Impossible Burger first came out. I remember going to the first restaurant I ever had an Impossible Burger at when I was a vegan, and to me it was the greatest thing in the world. No matter if you're a vegan, I know it's difficult to begin with, and for as many critiques as I have as the vegan diet, it does have its place in society. I don't think it's a long-term solution for people. I think maybe more than anything else, it should be used like medicine. It should be used as a short-term solution. You can cycle in and out of it. But I don't think being a long-term vegan is really, the best solution for most people. Granted, there are long-term vegans out there, and you know, they're on YouTube and they're on social media and they're talking about how great their vegan life is, and hey, just be happy. Whatever you're doing, that's fine. But you know, for most people, being a vegan is something you kind of dabble with and then you let it go. It's like a bowling league, you know? You do it for a short term, make some friends, make some drinking buddies, and then you stop doing it. So I'm not totally against the idea of plant-based meats, but I also think that these plant-based meats should be fully transparent in the toxicity of their ingredients. For the Impossible Burger, this takes the form of things like soy protein concentrate, coconut oil, sunflower oil, natural flavors, whatever that is. And also keep in mind too, when you take something like sunflower oil and you cook that and you heat it up, you're rancidifying the ingredient. You're making it a toxic metabolite. Leg hemoglobin, which is the Impossible Burger is known for the leg hemoglobin. I think I'm saying that right. Leg hemoglobin. The leg hemoglobin is what gives the Impossible Burger its burgery flavor. You know what else gives meat its meaty taste? The meat, the protein, the fact that it comes from an animal. You know, this is a flavor that has lived with humans since the beginning of humans. You know, what essentially they're doing is they're extracting or creating this heme iron in a lab, and they're injecting it into the Impossible Burger to make it more burgery. And again, as a vegan who's somebody who hasn't had meat for a long time, when you try the Impossible Burger, it tastes about as close to meat as you're gonna get. Now, if you try the Impossible Burger as not a vegan, it's pretty disgusting. So this whole controversy started when Moms Across America, the advocacy group, posted this article called GMO Impossible Burger Positive for Carcinogenic Glyphosate. What their main claim is that the Impossible Burger tested 11 times higher for glyphosate than the Beyond Burger. Glyphosate is pretty much an herbicide, it's a pesticide, it's the main ingredient found in the commercial product Roundup. It's pretty much sprayed commercially throughout the world on produce crops, on fruits, vegetables, soybeans, corn, and you know, this is where you start getting into things like genetically modified foods, because the whole point of genetically modified foods is that they can survive the spraying of glyphosate. On one hand, I understand the purpose of glyphosate because you want to kill all the bugs that eat away at your crops. On the other hand, there are more natural ways to go about doing that. Specifically things like crop rotation and you know, natural formulations that don't poison people when they eat them. It's just kind of one of these, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't things about the agricultural industry. And people have proposed solutions. Of course, there's organic farming that tries to minimize the amount of these pesticides that are used. But again, even organic farming isn't perfect. You're still gonna get trace amounts of glyphosate. It's really just to the extent of how much is the crop sprayed. And you know, you can find lists like the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen will tell you the most heavily sprayed crops that you're gonna find in the store. Unfortunately, they're crops that people also tout the health benefits of. Things like berries and kale and, you know, leafy greens, things like that. So glyphosate, you know, has a lot of deleterious effects. There's a lot of studies that show, you know, even at trace amounts, glyphosate can be very toxic to the human body. In fact, we've only really been using glyphosate for a short amount of time, and we're just now being able to study the long-term effects of glyphosate toxicity, which is something I'm going to go into here in this article. So Moms Across America basically writes this article about the toxicity of the ingredients in the Beyond Burger, right? And again, it's a plant-based burger, so it's very hard to not be sprayed with glyphosate, especially when they're using ingredients like wheat and soy. Those are two of the most heavily sprayed crops in the world. So Of course, Impossible Foods, they weren't down with this. They were like, well, who's Moms Across America? How are they just gonna play us like that? How are they just gonna write this article and try to slam the Impossible Burger, especially when the Impossible Burger is getting, you know, blown up, right? You can't even go a week without seeing it somewhere in the news. Restaurant after restaurant are adding the Impossible Burger to their menu, you know? Most notably, you've got Burger King revealing the Impossible Whopper, which, man, if I was a vegan, back in my vegan days, I would never have left Burger King. I would have spent at least a quarter of my paycheck going to Burger King, getting the Impossible Whopper. So I understand why that's such a big deal. So the Impossible Burger also has funding from Silicon Valley investors. I mean, there's billions of dollars in plant-based meats. So Moms Across America writes this letter. Impossible Foods is like, yo, Moms Across America, who the fuck are you? Impossible Foods comes back with this response, and basically what I want to do here is go through the response and pull out, you know, some of the facts and some of the propaganda that's going on here. So we're gonna go through the unofficial correction of the letter from Moms Across America, which is great that Impossible Foods feels like they're correcting Moms Across America. This is just big foods mansplaining at its finest. So right off the bat, Impossible Foods tries to slam the credibility of this group, Moms Across America. They say, here's just one example of untested, unregulated quack supplement containing coal extracts, among other ridiculous items that this site pursues, in many cases of people desperate for a cure for serious illness and disease. And what they're doing is they're pointing to the their supplements that they sell on the website. So, I mean, for any natural health website, so much of the internet, people in the health industry are selling supplements. You know, the supplement industry, I mean, is getting close to $50 billion, and so much of it is pushed by health professionals and alternative and natural health professionals. And yeah, there's a lot of dog shit out there, but there's a lot of stuff out there that's great. So first of all, when you see the word quack, typically that's used by insecure health professionals who are, you know, they're doctors or they're scientists, but they're very crusty people, like, you know, they're surgeons, and they make their living off of the mainstream medical industrial complex. They need to sell people on surgeries. They need to get people on pharmaceuticals, because this is how they make their living. This is how the insurance companies stay in business. This is how big pharma stays in business. You have to discredit alternative health people. Now granted, you know, there is a lot of shenanigans in the natural health community. I'm not denying that at all. But when you call a supplement like charcoal or activated charcoal quackery, you're really muddying the waters, because there is a lot of really interesting science and evidence that proves the efficacy of something like activated charcoal. So take, for instance, this study right here that was published in the Journal of Environmental Management, where they're basically trying to prove the efficacy of something like a charcoal supplement. And you see down here, quote, sulfate, fluoride ions, and toxic byproducts generated during electrochemical oxidation of ciprofloxacin were subsequently removed through a simple absorption treatment using activated charcoal. So people use charcoal for exactly this, to pretty much remove heavy metals and, you know, this kind of general broad term called toxins out, because charcoal will bind to these different elements and process them out of your body, which more and more people need, because we're being more and more exposed to toxic chemicals in the environment. Charcoal has so many uses that have been proven over and over again in the scientific literature. Medical News Today actually highlights some of these benefits, you know, where they benefit. Charcoal's been used to improve kidney health, intestinal gas, water filtration, diarrhea, skincare, deodorant, on and on. It's actually been used in emergencies to clear the body of NSAIDs and other over-the-counter anti-inflammatories, which of course can be very toxic to your body, sedatives, calcium channel blockers, and all kinds of stimulants that, again, can be very toxic to your liver. So people are wondering, like, you know, why do I have all of these autoimmune problems? Why do I have all of these issues with my skin? Why is my body not, why is my body just so burdened with toxicity? Well, it's because your liver's not working correctly. And something like charcoal can go in there and start removing this stuff and getting it out. Now, it's not a miracle drug. It's not gonna work on its own. Of course, you have to pair it with a healthy diet and lifestyle, but it is an absolute tool, and to use it, to call it quackery science is just beyond silly by a company that got schooled by the Beyond Burger. Now again, you scroll down here, and I mean, it's still more propaganda, you know, that Impossible Foods is just trying to slam, is just trying to discredit Moms Across America, you know, by stating Moms Across America is an anti-GMO. They're anti-GMO, the nerve of these people. And Impossible Foods would have a problem with that because their whole business model is built on GMOs. Anti-vaccine, anti-science, we're about to disprove that. Fundamentalist group that cynically peddles a toxic brew of medical misinformation and complete unregulated, untested, potentially toxic quack supplements, including $60 bottles of hydrogen water, coal extracts, and other bogus products, ripping off customers using scare tactics and distorted facts about science and medicine. This idea of quackery, it's like you're trying to discredit real scientists who actually have credentials, have actually been in the field, and they actually contribute to the data, read the data, and interpret the data for what it is, instead of this industry-funded perspective that is what pollutes our entire medical, modern, mainstream medical information, you know, bureaucracy. So let's get to the actual fake meat and potatoes of this article. At the very top of their letter, state that we are shocked to find that Impossible Burger can have up to 11 times higher levels of glyphosate residues than the Beyond Burger, according to the samples tested. Now, when they're putting the Impossible Burger up against Beyond Foods, it almost makes them seem like they're trying to push the Beyond Burger. Like, they're not really saying, like, hey, you know, fake meat is bad because it has glyphosate, but Impossible Burger is actually substantially worse than the Beyond Burger. And I think that just completely contradicts the whole point of what this should be about, which is that these fake meats are giving you high doses of this very toxic component, glyphosate. Also, it doesn't do Moms Across America any good to be, you know, trying to prop up something like Beyond Burger. But this is where the things start getting interesting as you start scrolling a little bit further down the response. Glyphosate is commonly detected at these low levels in both organic and non-organic foods. That's true. In fact, the minuscule levels of these chemicals that were detected in both the Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger were less than 1/1000th the limit set by EPA for glyphosate residue in dried pea and soybeans, respectively. They were even almost 100-fold lower than the glyphosate limits set by USDA and organic certification of pea protein and soy protein, i.e. the glyphosate levels measured in both products would easily pass the glyphosate residue requirements for organic certification, soybeans or peas, respectively. I find that to be interesting because basically what Impossible Foods is saying is that, yeah, we know we've got glyphosate in the burger, but there's some safe amounts of it. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, what are you gonna make a big deal about a little bit of glyphosate? Oh, here comes Moms Across America, just taking away our bowl, making us go to our room because we got some glyphosate. Oh my God, what's wrong with glyphosate? Like, come on, Moms Across America. There's like, loosen up, have an organic beer, relax. There's nothing wrong with glyphosate. What kind of square are you? Sounds like Moms Across America needs dads across America to come, you know, tap that ass, loosen her up a little bit. Sounds like Moms Across America needs to smoke a joint or something. The problem with the glyphosate industry is that we don't really know what the safe levels of glyphosate are, because a lot of these regulations were built on studies that were funded by the glyphosate industry, studies that were funded by companies like Monsanto, Bayer, that promoted products like Roundup. The numbers that they get in these studies are going to be favorable to being able to use glyphosate, you know? It's very difficult to say something like glyphosate is safe because we just don't know. How can you say that in a time when you have record numbers of chronic disease, you have record numbers of cancer, you have record numbers of autoimmune disease, you have record numbers of childhood obesity, you have record numbers of childhood disease. I mean, the stats go on and on and on. I mean, pharmaceuticals are given to these people, record numbers of that being sold. People are buying supplements off the counter like crazy because they're dealing with so many health issues. And the more and more polluted that our food supply becomes with glyphosate, the more and more you have to question, well, what level of glyphosate is safe? Is there even a safe limit? How do we know? Because the industry has been funding the studies. So we don't really know what the safe levels of glyphosate are to begin with, which is highlighted in this paper written by the OMICS, which pretty much is a review of a lot of the glyphosate literature out there, where they basically state that a lot of the literature does in fact show that glyphosate leads to deformities in people and in fetuses, which is even scarier. Quote, regulatory authorities and industry affiliates have defended the use of glyphosate largely by citing the industry-sponsored toxicological tests conducted for regulatory purposes, which they claim showed no evidence of teratogenicity. However, the German authorities' draft assessment report revealed that even these industry tests contain clear evidence of glyphosate-mediated teratogenicity and reproductive toxicity. Many of the malformations observed in these studies are of the type associated with the retinoic and acid signaling pathway. So basically what they're saying is that when you actually review the literature, the glyphosate, for lack of my ability to be scientific, is fucking shit up. What glyphosate does is it disrupts these different pathways to inhibit the deformation of the plants that they're on there. But when humans eat that stuff, it's doing the same exact thing in the human bodies. And that's what the literature is showing. It's showing that glyphosate is wrecking our natural pathways in humans, and this is what is essentially causing a lot of the disease. Many of the malformations observed in these studies are the type associated with the Paginelli et al., meaning his homies, showed that this was the mechanism through which glyphosate and Roundup exercised their teratogenic effects. It is noteworthy that these industry tests were commissioned by the same companies that stand to profit from regulatory authorization. Oh, you don't say. Regrettably, this system possesses an inherent risk of bias and makes it especially important that the regulatory assessment is rigorous. Yet in the EU, the evidence suggests that this was not the case. The significance of clear teratogenic effects of glyphosate in rabbits and rats found in tests commissioned by industry were minimized by German regulators. A scientifically rigorous assessment was further impeded by the outdated design of the standard tests, which are not sufficiently sensitive to detect the effects from realistic exposure. So basically, they're doing these tests. They're testing glyphosate with, you know, like rulers and shit. They're like, let's see if this rabbit feels okay when we give him some glyphosate. And they look at the rabbit. They're like, rabbit seems okay. Must be safe. As a result, the German authorities suggested and the EU adopted an acceptable daily intake for glyphosate that is unreliable and could potentially result in exposures that cause harm to can cause harm to humans. Another relevant factor is that the industry teratogenicity tests were on glyphosate, the presumed active ingredient of the herbicide, and not on the herbicide formulations as sold and used, even though studies indicate that the formulations are more toxic for certain endpoints than glyphosate alone. A substantial body of evidence demonstrates that glyphosate and Roundup cause teratogenic effects and other toxic effects on reproduction, as well as genotoxic effects. They're fucking up your genes. From an objective scientific standpoint, attempts by industry and government regulatory bodies to dismiss this research are unconvincing and work against the principle that is the responsibility of industry to prove that its products are safe and not the responsibility of the public to prove that they are unsafe. The precautionary principle would suggest that glyphosate and its commercial formulations should undergo a new risk assessment, taking full account of the entirety of the peer-reviewed scientific literature as well as the industry-sponsored studies. Experience to date suggests that the new risk assessments should be conducted with full public transparency by scientists who are independent of industry. So basically what they're saying is that when you look at the data, the industry are the ones designing these tests. The industry are the ones who are coming up with these just garbage studies that are formulated to make sure that they get the result they want so that they can put a study out there to show that their shit works, when in fact there's a lot of proof that shows not only does their stuff not work, but in fact it's very toxic and causes deformities in people. So you know, when Impossible Foods says something like, oh, our glyphosate is fine, we just don't know that, right? They could be right, but chances are, when you look at the numbers, again, of chronic disease, there's a good chance that they're not right. That in fact, that there is no safe measure, there is no safe amount of glyphosate in any foods, even fruits and vegetables. Now here's where things start to get interesting. You start going down the article here, and Impossible Foods is calling out moms across America for misinterpreting the science. So what Moms Across America says here is only 0.1 parts per billion of glyphosate has been shown to destroy gut bacteria. Impossible Foods comes back and says this is not even close to correct. In fact, it's wrong by a factor of almost 1,000,000-fold. The paper cited by Honeycutt demonstrates that the lowest glyphosate concentrations that could inhibit any of the bacteria tested was actually 0.075 milligrams per milliliter for Bifidobacterium adolescent. 0.075 milliliters or milligrams per milliliter is 75,000 parts per billion, not 0.1 part per billion. It appears that MMA rounded up from 0.075. Again, mansplaining from Impossible Foods, and then confused or intentionally misrepresented the milligrams per milliliter for parts per billion, when in fact 1 milligram per milliliter is 1,000,000 parts per billion. And Impossible Foods was like, that's right, bitch. Come at me. Now, Impossible Foods was responding to the original publication of this article, but what happened was that Moms Across America actually went back in and edited the article to put the correct study I believe they were trying to cite in the first place. Because what you see here is, on this response, is that it's only 0.1 parts per billion of glyphosate has been shown to destroy the gut bacteria. Okay, so that's what they're citing there. But when you go into the Moms Across America article, you get that same line, but then they add of over 4,000 genes in the livers, kidneys, and cause severe organ damage in rats. And you get these stars here, and you go down to the bottom of the article, and you can see that this was updated on May 18th with links to the organ and kidney damage study, which May 18th, that's the same day that this Impossible Foods response was cited. And when you actually go into the study that Moms Across America added, this is a study that was published in the, looks like the Environmental Sciences Europe journal. And it's called Republished Study, Long-Term Toxicity of a Roundup Herbicide and Roundup-Tolerant Genetically Modified Maize, i.e. corn, where it states, quote, biochemical analyses confirmed very significant chronic kidney deficiencies for all treatments and both sexes. 76% of the altered parameters were kidney-related. In treated males, liver congestion and necrosis were 2.5 to 5.5 times higher. Marked and severe neuropathies, nephropathies were also generally 1.3 to 2.3 times greater. In females, all treatment groups showed a 2 to 3-fold increase in mortality. Deaths were earlier. What they're saying here is that glyphosate's really fucked up. So what I think happened here was that Moms Across America prematurely published their paper, or they didn't edit it right, and they published it without adding in a very important study, which is where they get that 0.1 parts per billion. Now, they republished this paper on May 18th, the same day that the Impossible Foods paper came out. So they probably read the Impossible Foods paper and were like, son of a bitch, who dropped the ball? And they actually, on May 18th, cited the study that they're talking about where they got that 0.1 part per billion, which was a study that was published in the Environmental Sciences Europe journal. And you can clearly see right here that what this study did was study Roundup at just 0.1 parts per billion of the full pesticide containing glyphosate and adjuvants, and find that biochemical analyses confirmed very significant chronic kidney deficiencies for all treatments and both sexes. In fact, Moms Across America was able to back up their claim that even just 0.1 parts per billion can be or has been proven to be toxic. Now, of course, this isn't the end-all be-all study, but there is the evidence that Impossible Foods is claiming doesn't exist. So if you need any more evidence as to the unreliable safety claims that industry is making about glyphosate, you could look at more evidence that was published in the journal Current Microbiology, which shows glyphosate's harmful effects on good gut bacteria and the promotion of bad gut bacteria. Then you could actually look at this very critical article that details the work of two prominent anti-glyphosate scientists named Anthony Samsel and Stephanie Seneff, who are glyphosate researchers, and they bring a lot of this research to light. And I will say this article is very critical of these two authors, and you know, states that and is trying to make the case of discrediting these authors. But as you look down kind of towards the bottom here, there's this very interesting passage that quotes, "Although it has long been asserted by both industry and regulatory agencies that glyphosate is safe, even at relatively high daily intake levels, for example 1.75 milligrams per kilogram body weight per day in the US, major gaps in its evaluation have been identified and need to be addressed in order to definitely conclude on its safety. For example, glyphosate has never been tested alone at its acceptable daily intake or at doses relevant for human exposure. Only recently have studies been published that reveal kidney and especially liver structures and functional damage in rats following chronic ingestion of an ultra-low environmentally relevant dose of glyphosate-based herbicide Roundup. In addition, major endpoints of toxicity such as developmental, reproductive, transgenerational, and even chronic effects in adults still need to be investigated under controlled laboratory animal conditions at environmentally relevant doses using feed and water free from incidental glyphosate contamination. Indeed, most glyphosate toxicity studies have been performed without controlling for glyphosate contamination in food or water of laboratory animals used as non-exposed control, even though this feed has been found to be regularly contaminated by glyphosate residues." So basically what they're saying is that despite the fact that this article goes on to slam the anti-glyphosate research done by two very prominent anti-glyphosate researchers, this article states that there really hasn't been any evidence documented in studies that are properly done. You're supposed to have proper controls using the proper measurements, and when it comes to a lot of these pro-glyphosate usage studies, that work just isn't being done. So again, when it comes to the claim that Impossible Foods is making that we can just assume that glyphosate being used even at these small doses is pretty much safe, again, we really have no idea. And look, when it comes to the Tom J. fuckery of the glyphosate industry, and Monsanto especially, you have to understand that much of what's been written to promote genetically modified foods and the use of herbicides and glyphosate has been largely written by the glyphosate industry itself. In fact, there's this guy named Henry Miller who was thoroughly outed as a Monsanto shill during the 2012 Proposition 37 GMO labeling campaign in California. Miller, falsely posing as a Stanford professor, promoted genetically engineered foods during this campaign. In 2015, he published a paper in Forbes magazine attacking the findings of the International Agency for Research on Cancer, a branch of the WHO, after it classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen, after it was revealed that Miller's work was in fact ghostwritten by Monsanto. And Forbes not only fired him, but had to also remove his work. So we really have no accurate data on the safety of something like glyphosate. So it really is irresponsible to just say that even just a little bit of glyphosate is safe, because we just have no fucking clue. Now when it comes to the ingredient soy, that's very prominent in the Impossible Burger, this is a major hot topic between vegans and non-vegans, because you know, you get a lot of polarity here. You know, you get the non-vegans making the claim that there's really nothing healthy about soy. It increases estrogen. This can lead to something like estrogen dominance, which can be very toxic to your liver. It can cause a lot of hormonal dysregulation. It can cause a lot of problems. Now, on the vegan side, you'll get the argument that no, soy it's a healthy crop, it's a healthy bean, it promotes phytoestrogens, which is the regulator of soy, and of course it's the truth is somewhere in the middle. Now, Moms Across America comes out and says and makes the claim against soy by saying Impossible Burger is made of GMO soy, which has been shown to cause organ damage in animal studies and has been shown to be significantly different from non-GMO soy. The genetically modified ingredients of the Impossible Burger, which include genetically modified yeast and GM soy, hemoglobin proteins, 46 of which are undisclosed and untested, are even more concerning to many consumers than the long-term health effects from glyphosate because of the reported immediate allergic reaction potential, which is acknowledged by the manufacturer. Impossible Foods like, oh hell no, you are not going to talk about soy like that. Soy is our baby. The vegan diet and the Impossible Burger specifically needs soy. So we're on the front lines now of the soy battle for its life. So Impossible Foods comes back and says, there are not 46 undisclosed and untested soy hemoglobin proteins. In the course of extensive safety testing that resulted in an FDA no questions letter, Impossible Foods reported 46 unknown proteins found in yeast. This number is a fraction of the hundreds of thousands of different proteins in meat, from animal cadavers, cheese, yeast, our own bodies, and in everything we eat every single day and are still unknown. Scientists use labels unknown or hypothetical for proteins whose biological functions haven't yet been characterized. In addition, this link refers to our acknowledgement of the simple scientific fact that any of the thousands of proteins we consume every day has the potential to be an allergen, not a specific concern about the allergic potential of soy hemoglobin. Our soy hemoglobin is made by fermentation of a yeast strain that contains the hemoglobin gene from soybeans. Now, Impossible Foods isn't lying when they say they were able to obtain a no questions letter from the FDA, which is basically a green light showing that their product is in fact safe. The thing you have to realize is that no questions letter was obtained by a study. This study makes the claim that collectively the results of the studies presented raise no issues of toxicological concern with regard to the hemoglobin prep under the conditions tested. So that is true. This study absolutely does show that hemoglobin is in fact safe, but you know, like many articles and many studies published here, you have to kind of look a little bit further down to find where the tomfuckery is actually happening. So you see here at the bottom, you have the author's contributions. And then you come down here to the funding. The authors disclosed receipt of the following financial support for the research, authorship, and/or publication of the article. This work was supported by Impossible Foods. So basically, Impossible Foods funded the study, which, you know, is pretty shady, but it's not uncommon. You would like these studies to be independent, but unfortunately, you know, they need to get their main ingredient, the thing that the whole Impossible Burger rides on, the soy hemoglobin, they need to get that study published to show that it's safe. But the really fucked up thing is that not only did Impossible Foods pay for the study, but the main authors of the study are employees of Impossible Foods. They're the ones who crafted the study, they're the ones who critically reviewed the study. By the way, how can you have a critical review of a study by people who actually work for the company? There's no critical review. So again, Impossible Foods has put us in a position where we have no peer-reviewed data, we have no actual critical evidence that can show any kind of, you know, review done by a trusted scientific method. So basically what they're saying is that the Impossible Burger is safe. Why? Because we said so. Now the last point I want to make is down here at the end of the article, where you see kind of this little tit for tat, Moms Across America and then Impossible Burger responding directly to their claim. Because basically what Moms Across America is saying, look, all we want is for people to eat real food. And what they're saying is they just want people to eat real meat, which again, not perfect, but you know, in their eyes it's better than eating something that's just full of toxic crap like the Impossible Burger. Impossible Foods comes back and says, Impossible Foods calls upon all companies to do what's right for consumers and the environment. Nothing is more important for human health, global food security, and the future of the world than replacing the use of animals in food production. In fact, most of the agricultural pesticides used in the US are applied to crops fed to livestock. Impossible Foods makes a good point. The animal agriculture industrial industry is completely fucked up. And what they're selling people is meat that is derived from animals who are feeding on soybeans, which are the most heavily sprayed crops in the world. And the good thing is that there are now workarounds. You have more and more grass-fed, grass-finished meat. You have farmers actually trying to do this biodynamic organic farming. You have people actually trying to reverse the system to make the system not only healthier for people but better for the environment. So in the position that vegans take that their diet is not only healthier but it's better for the environment, there are a lot of truths to that. But in fact, it's not a carte blanche thing that we can just take at its word. Because when you actually read the data and you dive into the literature, you find there is a lot of lazy science happening, if you even want to call it science, that's promoting these products that people are being convinced is better than something like real meat. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I tried to be as discerning and impartial as I possibly could. Again, as somebody who was a vegan at one point, I know the beauty of the idea of something like lab-grown meat. And as somebody who genuinely cares about the environment and knows the faults in the current system we have, I do think the concept of something like lab-grown meat and fake meats is a good idea. Unfortunately, we don't need to do it considering we do have the methods available to build a system of sustainably grown animal agriculture. Although very imperfect and in many instances very violent and cruel to animals, it doesn't have to be like that. So that's the only point I was trying to make. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. Check out the Holistic A-Hole podcast and share the video with the people you love. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.